David committed adultery with Bathsheba. Bathsheba's father is Eliam. Eliam's father is Ahithophel. Ahithophel is David's counselor, therefore making Ahithophel's granddaughter Bathsheba. Now, does everybody understand the connection so far? Because this is going to become very critical. Now, anybody who has a grandson or a granddaughter knows how precious they are to you and how much you love them. And Ahithophel was no doubt very connected, like all the Jewish people were, to their family. Their family was what it was all about. Now, with that in mind, let's go on. Years went by. A decade goes by. And David has already suffered a lot, but now he's going to get hit real hard with a very interesting son named Absalom. Watch what happens in this story. Now, keep in mind what you've already learned so far. Here's what it says in 2 Samuel chapter 15. This is 10 years after the adulterous affair. It came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said unto the king, this is one of David's older sons, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. For thy servant vowed a vow while I abode at Gersher in Syria, saying, if the Lord shall bring me up again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. And the king said unto him, go in peace. And he arose and went to Hebron. Now watch what happens. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. In other words, what's beginning to happen here, his own son is getting ready to try to overthrow his kingdom, David's kingdom. And with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. In other words, they were just a couple hundred men going with them to try to, be with the king's son, never knowing what was getting ready to happen. And Absalom sent for who? What's it say there, folks? Ahithophel. Remember who Ahithophel's granddaughter is? Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gileadite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilon, while he offered sacrifices. Watch. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. Now, in the midst of all this, watch what happens. Absalom is going to overthrow his daddy. At least he's going to attempt to. And so he's going to do so by getting a certain person on his side. And the person that he wants on his side is the grandfather of King David's wife, who is actually Uriah's wife that he had murdered and who he had committed adultery with. Now, what ends up happening here is going to even get more interesting. It says in chapter 15, and there came a messenger to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. Now all of a sudden, he can see there's a conspiracy to overthrow David's kingdom. Watch what happens. David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, arise, let us flee, for we shall not yet escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us and smite the city with the edge of the sword. So he immediately said, we got to get out of the cities. Just like when the president found out 9/11, he had to get out of Washington, D.C. Get us out. We got to run and get out of this situation before it makes everything else worse. Watch closely. The king's servant said unto the king, behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. And the king went forth, and all his household after him. And the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house. Very important that you watch this. Now, verse chapter 15. David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olivet. and wept as he went up, and had his head covered. He went up barefoot, and all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and they went up weeping as they went up. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. What kind of reaction you think that would get from David? Watch what it says. And David says, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Why? Because he knew the power that this man had. But there was something that was driving him. Thank you, sis. I appreciate that. Thank you. He knew what was getting ready to happen if this literally would take place. Well, it says in chapter 16, and Absalom and all the people of the men of Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. All of a sudden, Ahithophel has switched teams. And this is something that now David is scared about. I'm getting somewhere with this, so stay with me. It says in chapter 16 and verse 20, Then said Absalom to Ahithophel, the grandfather of Bathsheba, Give counsel among you. What shall we do? Ahithophel said to Absalom, Go in unto thy father's concubines. Now, you want to talk about a twisted way of thinking? Watch what he does. Remember those 10 concubines that he left to take care of the castle? Watch what happens. Go in into thy father's concubines. Take your father's wives, concubines, which he hath left to keep the house, and all Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of thy father, and then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong. So they spread Absalom a tent upon the top of the house. Remember, where was David when this whole story happened with his granddaughter? I mean, with Ahithophel's granddaughter, it happened at the top of the house. So here's a guy a decade later saying, I know what we can do. Let's spread a big old tent on top of the house. And I want you to go into your father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Something is brewing in this man's heart, folks. Watch what happens. The counsel of Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, was as if a man had acquired of the oracles of God. So was the counsel of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. In other words, they thought, man, this guy's so stinking smart. What a way to deal with it. So, watch what happens in chapter 17. Moreover, Ahithophel said unto Absalom, I'll tell you what I want to do. He said, here's what, now this is without any advice. He just walks up and says, Absalom, here's what I want to do. Let me now choose out 12,000 men. And I will arise, I personally will arise and pursue after David this night. I'll do this tonight. I will arise and pursue him this night, and I will come upon him while he is weary and weak-handed, and will make him afraid. Watch. And all the people that are with him shall flee, and I will smite the king only. He said, you know what? And look how Ahithophel's mind's now working, folks. This guy is such a dreamer, and now this intense desire for revenge of what he had done to his granddaughter is starting to eat him so badly that he literally has come up with this perfect scenario story. Matter of fact, this story kind of will remind you of how he felt that his granddaughter's husband probably felt. Remember? They were to be brought into the battle, and all of a sudden they would get afraid. They'd all turn around, and there was Uriah all by himself, and he got killed. And here's what Ahithophel says, I'm going to do to David what he did to my granddaughter's son.